Police use pepper spray against high-speed rail project protesters. A controversial government plan to rebuild Queen's Pier in Central, and Afghan officials give up hope of finding more landslide survivors.
Good evening. Protesters clashed with police today during a demonstration against the high-speed rail project's cost overrun. As Rachel Leung reports, authorities used pepper spray during the conflict.
Open up the roads, yelled the protesters. The demonstrators marched from Cheetah Garden to the central government offices this afternoon to protest against the high-speed rail project's cost overrun. When they were getting close to the central government offices, they demanded that the police expand their designated protest route. Clashes broke out between the two sides. Some protesters even broke through the police barriers. The police then announced through loudspeakers that the protesters were in breach of the terms listed in the letter of no objection to the rally. Officers demanded that they stay on the designated route. However, the demonstrators paid no attention to the police warning. The authorities then used pepper spray to control the crowd. Those who got hit had used water to clean out their eyes. This is not the first time demonstrators took to the streets protesting against the high-speed rail link. A similar protest was held 4 years ago outside the Legislative Council. However, this time around, the protesters also demanded that the government stop other white elephant projects, including the Northeast New Territories Development Project and the studies on artificial islands off the eastern part of Lantau Island. Rachel Leung, TVB News.
The government wants to rebuild the historic Queen's Pier in Central 7 years after it was controversially torn down. But the plan is being criticised as meaningless and a waste of money. Demolished in 2007 amid a storm of protest, the government had planned to rebuild Queen's Pier last year. For the past 7 years, it's been kept in a government explosives storage warehouse on Lantau. Early last year, the government spent $980,000 for experts to make sure the structures are still sound, but it'll be in storage for a few more years yet. The Development Bureau earlier decided to rebuild Queen's Pier and place it between Piers 9 and 10 in Central. The two new piers, built less than a decade ago, look more modern and significantly different from the old Queen's Pier. The government has hired a consultant to redesign the new piers and plans to start work in 2 years' time, with the project expected to be finished in 2018. Chu Hoi-tik was one of the activists who tried to stop the demolition of Queen's Pier. Calling the government's plan stupid, Chu said what they were trying to preserve was the history and memories of the whole civic area between Star Ferry Pier, Queen's Pier and City Hall.
It recalls a history of civic movement since 1960s of Hong Kong. So if we take away Queen's Pier and then we rebuild it somewhere else, either in the near waterfront or elsewhere, it becomes meaningless.
He criticised the new plan as a waste of public money. According to government plans, the original Queen's Pier site will be transformed into a harbourfront plaza with outdoor eateries, combining leisure and commercial activities. An academic urged the government to put Queen's Pier back in its original place.
What is most important principle in heritage preservation is that the original historical story is still visible and can still be told in the original place. So that's why the historical meaning of being in the same place, it's far more important than its functional replacement.
She says Hong Kong people would appreciate it and called on the government to write a good ending to this piece of the city's history. The Financial Secretary warned today that there are certain people out there to deliberately work against the implementation of universal suffrage in the 2017 chief executive election. Evelina Leung tells us more.
More than 36,000 proposals were submitted to the government in the political reform consultation that ended yesterday. Today, Financial Secretary Zhang Zhang wrote on his blog that radical views were expressed during the consultation process. He originally thought these were part of the negotiation tactics and the various sides would eventually compromise to allow Hong Kong to move forward on the road of democratization. However, over the past few months, he noticed that there are certain people who are determined to stand firm and refuse to negotiate. Zhang said it feels like these people are trying to work against the implementation of universal suffrage in the 2017 chief executive election. The financial chief also referred to the budget debate filibuster at the Legislative Council, where a few radical voices are dominating the discussions, while some others are taking a vague stance of not supporting either the filibuster or measures to stop it. Zhang said in the end, society will simply be wasting time on debate and not getting the job done. Lawmaker Leung Kwok-hung hit back. He compared this to buying shoes, saying people will only buy shoes that fit them but not others. Leung said by demanding that Hong Kong reject any proposal that doesn't include civil nominations, they're not deliberately attempting to prevent the implementation of universal suffrage in 2017. The legislator added that the filibuster at LegCo is simply a way for lawmakers to voice their demand for a universal pension scheme. Evelina Lang, TVB News.
Well, Tam Yu-chung, chairman of the LegCo Committee on Rules of Procedure, says the LegCo president will eventually have to decide when to cut short the filibuster. And this comes as parties are still unable to reach a consensus on how to end filibusters. Stephanie Choi has that story.
Wednesday's debate on the Appropriation Bill 2014 was suspended after a quorum was not present. While Tam Yu-chung, chairman of the Democratic Alliance for the Betterment and Progress of Hong Kong, admitted absent members were responsible, he said quite a number of them chose to stay away simply because of the filibuster. He accused those lawmakers of putting on a show and insulting the government. When asked about the duty of lawmakers to listen to even the dullest of meetings, Tam had this to say. Sometimes lawmakers would rather tend to other matters while watching the live telecast of meetings, Tam said. He hopes with enough persuasion, legislators would return to the debate as soon as possible. LegCo President Zhang Yuk-sing had suggested handing the power to halt the filibuster over to lawmakers. Tam said he is concerned pan-democratic lawmakers may further politicize the issue if they object to halting the filibuster. He believes Zhang Yuk-sing would be able to make a fairer decision. Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
Turning overseas now, Afghanistan held a day of mourning today for the victims of a massive landslide in the remote northeast. The number of people killed or missing has now been put at between a few hundred and 2,700. As fears of a new landslide have complicated rescue efforts, officials and aid workers are turning their attention to helping the survivors of the catastrophe. Afghanistan's government has declared a day of mourning for the hundreds of people killed in massive landslides on Friday. Many more remain missing, and the final death toll could be in the thousands. The disaster happened in the country's northeast, near the border with the Central Asian country of Tajikistan. Aid workers helping with the search and rescue efforts say the focus now is assisting the more than 4,000 displaced people. Their main needs are water, medicine, food and emergency shelter.
We in the international organization have been bringing blankets and household items, solar lanterns, and there are a number of NGOs and UN agencies also bringing items such as tents, food, hygiene supplies and so forth. The problem is not delivering this immediate assistance to the survivors. Now we're going to be working with those who are temporarily displaced to ensure that they're okay.
Danziger also went on to say that the scale of this disaster is absolutely devastating, with entire communities wiped off the map. Thousands of people were at home when a side of a mountain collapsed and covered the area with mud and rocks. Hundreds more went missing when they were caught in a second landslide. Heavy rain is believed to have triggered the two landslides. The impoverished area, which is dotted with villages of mud brick homes, has been hit by several landslides in recent years. A British newspaper has reported that Malaysian authorities are investigating 11 men over the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Some were reportedly arrested in the capital, Kuala Lumpur, while others were detained in the Malaysian state of Kedah. According to the Daily Mail, they are alleged to have links to the Al-Qaeda terror group. There has been no official confirmation from the Malaysian government. Nearly 2 months of searching for the missing jetliner have so far yielded no pieces of wreckage or signs of the flight data recorder. 239 passengers and crew were on board the flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, with many of the passengers from China. Malaysia Airlines says it's been in touch with the families of those on board the missing flight to begin talks about compensation.
The southern Ukrainian city of Odessa is in shock today as residents mourn the deaths of dozens of people who died in clashes between pro- and anti-government protesters on Saturday. James Aitken reports.
Mourners gather near the burned-out shell of a trade union building where a day earlier at least 43 people died in clashes between pro-Kiev and pro-Moscow supporters. The battle culminated when government opponents took refuge in the building that caught fire after protesters threw firebombs inside. The violence raises the prospect of unrest sweeping more broadly across the country. It was brother fighting brother, says Alexei, a railway worker. This will never lead to anything good for a country. We need to stay together and get united. Unfortunately, these events give the Russian side reason to send troops here, says this Odessa resident. I hope they don't come here. We have to sort out our mess on our own. The vibrant port city of 1 million is far from the rebel stronghold of Slavansk and even farther from the Russian border. The Kremlin says the Odessa deaths are evidence that the interim government in Kiev encourages national extremists. The bloodshed comes as Ukrainian forces continue their biggest push yet to retake control over rebel-held areas in the east, capturing buildings and checkpoints. Kiev says troops have completely encircled Slavansk. As many as 10 people have died in fighting in the region over the last day. Meanwhile, in at least one positive development in the crisis, a group of European military observers held by pro-Russian militia for more than a week has arrived in Berlin. Their release, along with the release of 5 Ukrainian soldiers accompanying them, was achieved with the help of a Russian envoy. The head of the European Observer Mission in Ukraine says the release is part of a process to secure all hostages being held by separatists.
The most important question, the important question now is how the detainees who remain in Slavyansk and elsewhere are treated.
Do you know how many there are?
We do not know. We have not seen them all, but we believe there are potentially dozens.
James Aiken, TVB News.
Not much was off limits as US President Barack Obama tossed out playful but pointed jokes on Saturday night at the annual White House Correspondents Association dinner. Not even Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Last year, Pat Buchanan said Putin's headed straight for the Nobel Peace Prize. He said this. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but to be fair, they give those to just about anybody these days.
Obama is, of course, a Nobel laureate himself. The annual dinner has become a tradition in Washington, promising a black tie evening of humor and celebrity gazing. The event once again attracted an array of journalists, government officials, politicians and media personalities as the association raised money for college scholarships. The Correspondents Association, which represents the White House Press Corps, celebrated its 100th anniversary.
At least 3 people were killed in a grenade blast at a bus stop in the Kenyan coastal city of Mombasa on Saturday. Witnesses say an attacker on a bicycle lobbed the grenade at passengers waiting for a bus. Separately, a bag with an improvised explosive device was spotted near the Coastal Reef Hotel in Nyali. A person nearby noticed the device in time to take cover before it detonated. No one was hurt there. 7 people were also injured in the blast in the region of Mwembe Tayari. There has been no immediate claim of responsibility for the attacks. Kenya has been hit by a wave of gun and explosive attacks since it sent troops to neighbouring Somalia to fight al-Shabaab militants in 2011. Well, members of Pope Francis's Sexual Abuse Advisory Board say they will develop clear and effective protocols